The radar beeped. A single, soft sound. Barely noticeable in the silent control room. Vaila frowned and glanced at the screen. The signal was weak, flickering in and out. It didn't make sense. The void between stars was empty. At least, it was supposed to be. She tapped a few buttons. The scan repeated. Beep. Beep. A ship. Her heart stopped. No, that was impossible. The screen showed something moving fast, something that wasn't registered in any known database. Its shape was unfamiliar, its energy signature unrecognizable. But the strangest thing was the composition. It was primitive. Metal alloys, old-fashioned fuel sources, a flawed design. No intelligent race in the galaxy would build a ship like this. Vaila's throat tightened. There was only one species in history that had ever built ships this way. Humans. But they were extinct. For centuries, the Union had told their people that humanity was nothing more than a terrible myth, a violent species that had burned too brightly and destroyed itself long ago. But now, she was looking at proof that the legends were wrong. And worse, it was heading straight for them. A tense command. Commander Vaila, a voice crackled through the communicator. We have an unidentified object approaching fast. I see it, she replied, trying to keep her voice calm. Run another scan. Triple check. This could be a mistake. Silence. Then. Scan confirmed. It's real. Vaila's fingers curled into fists. She turned to the massive viewport, staring into the darkness of space. There was nothing visible yet, but she could feel it. The eerie sensation of something ancient returning. Something dangerous. The war had ended centuries ago. Or so she had been told. If a human ship still existed, then it meant one of two things. Either the humans had somehow survived, or something worse was coming. The Council's secret. Vaila didn't trust the Union. As a high-ranking officer, she had seen how they hid things, classified information, secret missions, untold histories. If humans had really been wiped out, why did the Union still refuse to let anyone study the old records? Why were humans treated like forbidden knowledge? Now, standing on her warship with an unknown vessel charging toward them, she knew the truth. The Union had been lying. And she was about to find out why. A decision that could change everything. Commander, your orders, one of her officers asked. The crew was waiting. Their eyes were full of fear. Vaila hesitated. The standard protocol was simple, destroy any unidentified threat. But she couldn't. Not yet. Not without answers. Hold fire, she commanded. The officer hesitated. But, Commander. I said hold fire. She needed to see it with her own eyes. She needed to know. If this was truly a human ship, then the galaxy was about to change forever. Ghosts of a dead race. The silence in the command deck was suffocating. Vaila's golden eyes stayed locked on the radar screen, where the unidentified ship moved with slow, deliberate precision. It wasn't broadcasting any signals. No distress call, no attempt at communication. Just a ghost drifting through space. She swallowed. This had to be some kind of trick. Prepare an intercept course, she ordered, forcing her voice to remain steady. Her second-in-command, Yuren, stiffened. Commander, we shouldn't get closer. If the Union hears about this. They won't. Yuren hesitated. If this ship is what we think it is, then we aren't just dealing with an unknown vessel. We're dealing with an impossibility. That was an understatement. Humans were dead. They had been wiped from existence before her ancestors were even born. Everyone knew the stories, their war, their destruction, their extinction. So how was this ship real? And why was it heading straight for them? A ship lost in time. Vaila activated the long-range visual feed. The blurry image on the screen sharpened, revealing a vessel covered in scars and battle damage. It looked ancient. Strange, mismatched plating covered its hull, like it had been repaired countless times with whatever materials were available. The engines flickered, unstable but functional. But the most terrifying part? The ship's markings. Even through the wear and tear, one symbol remained untouched, a faded insignia, shaped like a blue sphere with white streaks swirling around it. Vaila's breath caught in her throat. It was the symbol of Earth. Uren swore. It's impossible. It shouldn't even be flying. But it was. A signal from the dead. A sudden ping broke the silence. Commander, one of the officers turned, his eyes wide. They're sending a transmission. The crew froze. It shouldn't have been possible. No one alive spoke the human language anymore. The Union had erased every trace of it centuries ago. And yet, a garbled voice crackled over the speakers, a deep, broken sound, laced with static and the echoes of a time long gone. Vaila's hands clenched into fists as she listened. The words were distorted, but one thing was unmistakable. It was speaking in human speech. Uren turned pale. What do we do? Vaila didn't answer. Because at that moment, another realization hit her. This ship. It wasn't just some human relic. It was a warning. And it had come too late. The voice in the dark. The ship's transmission repeated. A broken voice. Static-choked words. A language that had no place in the modern galaxy. Vaila's throat tightened as the alien yet strangely familiar syllables filled the command deck. She didn't understand the language, not fully, but she felt it. It was human. A voice from a species that wasn't supposed to exist. Commander. Uren's voice was tight, his usual calm shaken. This isn't possible. No, it wasn't. And yet, it was happening. Vaila stepped forward, staring at the ancient ship through the viewport. Its damaged hull drifted closer, slow and steady, like something out of a nightmare. The crew had gone silent. No one breathed. No one moved. Because they all understood the same terrifying truth. The stories were lies. Humans were not myths. They were real. And now, one of their ghosts was speaking across the void. A language long forgotten. The audio crackled again. A faint, rhythmic sound played in the background of the transmission, something soft, deep, and deliberate. A pattern. Vaila frowned. Her fingers danced across the control panel, isolating the repeating tones. It's coded, she muttered. Uren leaned in. A distress signal? No, she whispered. A message. The realization sent a chill down her spine. Whoever had sent this signal hadn't been asking for help. They had been warning someone. A shadow in the stars. A new blip flashed on the radar. Another ship. No. Several ships. Vaila's breath caught. Multiple signatures incoming, fast. The screen lit up with more signals, converging from all sides. But these weren't like the drifting relic before them. These ships were fast, predatory, and their energy readings were disturbingly familiar. The Union. Uren cursed under his breath. They're already here. Of course, they were. Vaila had known the moment she saw the human ship that this wasn't just a discovery. It was a trap. The Union never left loose ends. If humans had left something behind, something that threatened the carefully crafted history of the galaxy, then the Union would burn every trace of it. Including Vaila's ship. One chance to act. A warning siren blared across the command deck. Incoming weapons lock, an officer shouted. They're charging for an attack. Vaila's heart pounded. She had seconds to decide. Seconds before the Union silenced the truth forever. Her gaze snapped back to the human ship. It had survived something impossible. It had drifted through space for who knew how long, carrying a message that no one was meant to hear. And she had heard it. The Union was coming to erase the past. Vaila clenched her fists. She wouldn't let them. Shields up. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, she barked. And get me a direct link to that human ship. Yuren's eyes widened. You're going to talk to it? We don't have a choice. Because something told Vaila that whatever message this ship carried, it was the key to everything. And if she wanted to survive the next few minutes, she had to learn exactly what the humans left behind. Before the Union wiped them out for good. The last warning. The Union warships cut through the void like blades. Vaila could see them now, sleek, silver hulls reflecting the distant starlight. Their engines burned with cold precision, closing in from every direction. No escape. No room to run. She wasn't supposed to know the truth. She wasn't supposed to hear the voice of a dead species. But she had. And now, the Union would bury her with it. Commander. Enemy weapons locking on. The command deck filled with flashing red lights. Sirens howled. The crew moved in frantic motions, but Vaila didn't move. Her golden eyes stayed locked on the decaying human ship drifting ahead. A relic of the past. A warning for the future. And she needed to hear it, before it was too late. A voice from the grave. Open a direct link to that ship, Vaila ordered. Yuren hesitated. Commander, if the Union. They're going to kill us either way, she cut in. I need to know what it's saying. Silence. Then. The bridge speakers crackled to life. The transmission played again, clearer this time. The voice was damaged, warped by time, but still unmistakably human. The words were broken. Lost in static. But one phrase came through clearly. A warning. They are still here. Vaila's blood ran cold. Not they were here. They are. The forgotten enemy. A tremor ran through the ship as the first Union missiles launched. They're firing. Brace for impact. Explosions bloomed outside, flashing like dying stars. Vaila gritted her teeth as the ship rocked violently, alarms screaming in protest. Her mind was racing. The message. It wasn't about humans. Humans were gone. So who was still here? A desperate escape. Another blast. The shields wouldn't hold much longer. Yuren's voice was sharp with panic. Commander, we can't fight them. We need to retreat. Retreat? No. If she left now, the Union would destroy the human ship. They would erase everything, the message, the proof, the truth. She would never know what really happened. She had spent her whole life following their rules, obeying their commands. Not anymore. Vaila turned to her crew, eyes burning. Set a docking course. Yuren's head snapped toward her. You're not serious. We have one chance, she said. If that ship has answers, I'm getting them myself. Yuren stared, then exhaled in resignation. A moment later, the engines roared. Vaila's warship surged forward, weaving between incoming fire. The Union ships adjusted course, but they weren't expecting her to charge straight toward the relic. Their hesitation was all she needed. The docking clamps extended. The airlock hissed. And Vaila stepped onto a ship that should not exist. What the dead left behind. The moment she crossed the threshold, everything changed. The ship wasn't just old. It was wrong. The air was thick, heavy with something ancient. And in the flickering shadows of the ruined hallway, something moved. The ghost that breathed. The air inside the human ship was thick, stale, alive with something unseen. Vaila's boots echoed against the rusted metal floor as she stepped forward, her breath slow, controlled. The walls were scarred with burn marks, clawed open in places, exposing the bones of a ship that had survived something no one should have. Behind her, the docking seal hissed shut. The rest of her crew was still on their warship, holding back the Union's attack. She was alone. The flickering emergency lights painted strange shadows across the hull. Something about the silence felt wrong. Like the ship was waiting. Then she heard it. A whisper. Barely there. Just a breath of sound. But it was not static. It was alive. A forgotten survivor. Vaila's hand hovered over her weapon. She moved carefully, her golden eyes scanning every dark corner. The human voice from the transmission still echoed in her head. They are still here. But who? Humans. That was impossible. Unless. A shiver crawled up her spine. The ship was ancient. It should have been lifeless. It wasn't. A faint glow pulsed deeper within the ship, like the dying heartbeat of a long-lost creature. Vaila followed it, passing doorways covered in alien writing, terminals flickering with unreadable warnings. Then she reached the command deck. And she saw it. A face from the past. A figure sat slumped in the pilot's chair. A body. No, a person. Vaila froze. The figure was still, wrapped in faded, tattered fabric. A uniform, maybe. Their face was obscured by a cracked helmet. Their arms hung loosely at their sides. They looked dead. But then. They inhaled. A slow, rattling breath. Vaila's pulse slammed against her ribs. It was human. A human alive. The eyes of a dead species. The figure stirred. And then, they lifted their head. The helmet's visor was dark, but in the dim light, Vaila saw something that sent ice through her veins. Eyes. Not the slit-pupilled, golden eyes of her people. Not the piercing silver of the Union elite. These eyes were round. Deep. Human. And they were staring right at her. What should not exist? Vaila's mind raced. A human. A living, breathing human. This was impossible. Humans were gone. Erased. Yet here one was, alive, staring at her with something unreadable in their gaze. Slowly, their fingers twitched. The ship around them creaked. The lights flickered. And then, with a voice that was hoarse, broken, and edged with something ancient, the human spoke. You shouldn't be here. The human who remembered. The air between them felt like it had frozen. Vaila's heart pounded as she stared at the human, a living human. His voice, hoarse and cracked with age, echoed through the empty ship. You shouldn't be here. Her throat was dry. Her mind screamed at her that this was wrong, that everything she knew about history, about humanity, was a lie. But she wasn't dreaming. And he wasn't a ghost. Who? The word barely escaped her lips. Who are you? The human inhaled slowly, his chest rising with the effort. The motion looked unnatural, like his body had forgotten how to breathe. His gloved fingers curled against the armrest of his chair. Then, in a voice worn down by time, he answered. The last. A relic from a lost war. Vaila swallowed hard. She had to think, had to understand. This ship had been drifting for centuries, but he was alive. How? No stasis pod. No life support system running at full power. He should have been dust. Yet here he was. You're human, she whispered, as if saying it aloud would make it any more real. The man gave a slow, weary nod. And you are not. There was something behind his words, something heavy. Not fear. Not confusion. Recognition. Like he had seen her kind before. Like he knew her. The Union's greatest lie. Vaila's head spun. None of this made sense. Humans were gone, the Union made sure of that. But now, she was standing before a survivor. A living piece of history. What happened to your people? She asked. The war, their destruction, was it all true? For the first time, the human moved. His shoulders tensed. His fingers clenched. Then he let out a breath. A bitter, tired sound. Is that what they told you? Vaila felt a chill run down her spine. It wasn't an answer. It was a challenge. The war that never ended. Outside, another explosion shook the ship. The Union was still out there, still trying to erase the last traces of humanity. Her time was running out. I don't have long, she pressed. Tell me the truth. The human exhaled slowly. His hand lifted weakly, pointing at the nearest control panel. Play it. Vaila hesitated before moving. The ancient console flickered to life under her touch. A file, buried deep in the ship's memory banks, unlocked. A recording. The screen blinked. A grainy video played. And then, she saw them. Humans. Hundreds. Thousands. Their voices rising in defiance, their faces hardened with desperation. They were fighting. Not against each other. Not against their own destruction. Against something else. Vaila's breath caught. The war that destroyed humanity wasn't what they had been told. It hadn't been a war at all. It had been a slaughter. And the Union had made sure no one ever knew. The truth buried in blood. The screen flickered again. The image shifted. And Vaila saw something worse. A shadow moving behind the lines of human soldiers. Not Union forces. Not any species she recognized. Something else. Something that shouldn't exist. Her pulse slammed against her ribs. The Union wasn't just covering up human history. They were covering up the enemy that wiped them out. The real war hadn't ended. It had never stopped. The war that never ended. The screen went dark. The recording had finished. But the silence it left behind was louder than any explosion. Vaila's hands trembled against the console. Her golden eyes flicked to the human, his worn face emotionless, as if he had watched that same footage 1,000 times before. You saw it, he murmured. Vaila's mind raced. This changed everything. The Union hadn't just lied about humans. They had lied about the war. The enemy that destroyed humanity, they were still out there. And the Union had spent centuries hiding it. The last soldier. The human shifted, his movements slow, like someone waking from a lifetime of sleep. They wiped us out, he said, voice rough with old wounds. And when it was over, the Union erased the truth. Buried it under myths and propaganda. Vaila clenched her fists. But why? Because the war isn't over. His tired eyes locked onto hers. It never was. Her breath hitched. If what he said was true, if the Union had been covering this up for centuries, then the entire galaxy was sitting in the dark, blind to the threat still lurking in the void. Waiting. Hunting. No time left. A tremor shook the ship. Outside, Union warships were still circling, their weapons primed to erase the last trace of this secret. Her crew wouldn't hold out much longer. Vaila turned back to the human. You've been hiding here all this time. No, he exhaled. I've been waiting. A chill ran down her spine. For what? The human's lips curved into the faintest, most haunted smile. For someone to listen. The choice that would change everything. The intercom crackled with Uren's voice. Commander. We can't hold them off much longer. She had seconds to decide. If she left now, the Union would erase the human, destroy his ship, bury the truth forever. But if she took him? If she escaped with this knowledge? She wouldn't just be a soldier anymore. She would be a traitor. A revolutionary. A spark that could set fire to the lies of an empire. Vaila turned to the human. Can you still fight? His body was weak. His breath was ragged. But his eyes? His eyes burned like a man who had never stopped fighting. He pushed himself to his feet, his stance unsteady, but unbroken. I can. Vaila's jaw tightened. Then she reached for her communicator. Uren. Prepare for emergency extraction. A pause. Then, Commander. She took one last look at the ship. At the battle scars, the broken screens, the blood-stained walls. A relic of a war that never ended. A warning of what was coming. Vaila turned back to the human. Let's finish what they started.